quickly, I'd imagine, because you're around them a lot. And you can kind of tell which kids are going to be the ones that are a little bit more like they want structure, they want some kind of security. It doesn't mean that we don't want them to learn how to take risks too, but I always say it's like a bubble. Certain personality types live in a bubble, and that sounds bad, but it's not really bad because bubbles are really safe, right? But you want that bubble to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you don't get it bigger by popping it. You have to like slowly, gradually spread it out, and then it becomes their whole bubble is huge, and everything within that bubble is really safe. But then, of course, other children are different. You want them to like really push themselves and take risks, and they're the ones who are better. Like I said, just jump, just go forward, because when they're young, the stakes are really low, right? And we want them to learn and get that power so that when they're older and the stakes are really high, they won't have a problem.
So as the quiz that I took, would I take that on my kids' behalf?
That's, depending on the parent, like how well you're going to read it or answer the questions in terms of what they are versus what you want them to be. I think with
Hmm.
parents and kids, it's a lot harder. I found, obviously we had thousands of kids, so we saw thousands of parents and that relationship between the two. Some of the
Yeah.
parents would often put, my kid's a good kid. That was probably like the most common because we had an interview beforehand and we'd ask, oh, how's your kid? And we kind of wanted more like personality traits and so that way the tutor could adjust. The parents oftentimes just put they're a good kid. They follow the rules, like they're good. And it's like, well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. And by the way, by not, I don't mean they're not good. I just mean maybe they don't have a natural instinct to follow the rules, which is okay. You can work with that as long as we know. So, I don't know if that answered the question, but
Oh, I think it absolutely did. And as you were sharing that, it was whether it's I my brain went in seven different directions. Let me backtrack. So when I thought about doing this for my sons, and it's I got a little bit more. My concern lies in less about what I would want the answers to be, and more so in whether I'm understanding them well enough. That my younger son, I thought he just didn't give a fuck. Like, this kid is just, like, born different. He is just indestructible. He falls, he smacks his face, blood on his mouth, and he's like, "Mama, I taste blood," and he keeps going. My elder, firstborn, sensitive, kind, caring, empathetic, just, like, feels everything right at the surface, big feelings. He paper cut, and it's like, "Ugh, I need a Band-Aid. Can you do this for me?" And they're just built so different, and my younger son, I think because he is just tougher, in the way that he presents himself, that I led with assumption that he was more unfeeling.
I
And
see.
now as he's getting older, he's 5, I see that he does have really big feelings, he just shoves them far down and doesn't allow for them to, like, be as readily available.
He wants to appear tough, right? I mean, he is tough, but he also wants to
Yeah.
appear that way. It's great because like
Yeah.
I just think of like archetypal like characters. I use a lot of character references in the book. By character, I mean
Mhm.
fictional characters because it's like they are like real people, like just 100 at times 100. And that just kind of reminds me of like scenes from like Game of Thrones. I use Game of Thrones references quite a bit because there's so many characters. But it sounds a lot like
Yeah.
Arya. Arya's character was
Yeah.
always just like I'm tough, even though obviously as an audience we can see no, there's feelings inside, there intense feelings, but some people just don't want to show it. Um, yeah, your youngest sounds a little like a shark. Funny enough that I mentioned sharks earlier. Sharks, I mean, this is once again a guess, but sharks are really physical. They love activity. They love to move around. They love to take chances. They don't mind getting hurt really because they kind of just brush it off. One of their weaknesses would be sometimes they have all these emotions and sometimes they don't use their words, right? They don't express themselves. They want to keep it all in because of how they want to appear. Or sometimes they don't maybe even think about those things and they let them fester. So
Yeah.
that would be the description of a shark.
I think you're exactly spot on, and he's obsessed with sharks. His All of his birthdays have been sharks so far, so maybe this is.
My sister's a shark, so I definitely know how that feels. And it's my older sister, and that's one of the thing why I'm always dinging birth order too, because people are like, birth order, the oldest is always a responsible, caring one. And not to say that my sister's not caring, but I'm like, responsible? What are you talking about? Like, she thinks she's responsible. Like, that's just one of those things where it depends on personality. Now, half the population do fit into a specific, I call them personality packs. Half of them fit into one. that if they are the oldest sibling, then they definitely will take on that mantle of responsibility. They'll become the second or third parent. But that's not the other half of the population. And anyone who's ever had a older sibling who's not part of that pack knows that for sure.
Yeah. We had definitely had that. I think my elder son will be that way.
Mm,
My eldest brother was and then wasn't. I think there was just so much pressure to be that person, and it just overwhelmed his ability to kind of
mm,
cope with it. And yeah, the birth order thing I think it's very hit or miss. It's either it does feel like a very all or nothing one of two ways that it could
yeah.
go. It's so interesting.
And yeah, and they make up
Okay.
half the population. So my youngest brother, or I have three or two siblings, where there's three of us, and the youngest of us, well, I call them gatherers. That personality pack are called gatherers. They value safety and security. He's one of those, and he naturally gravitates to that. So he's the one texting us saying, "Oh, what should we get mom for her birthday?" And then my sister and I won't respond. And then I was thinking we get her this, and we don't respond. And he's like, "Okay, I got her this," and then we respond, "Okay, cool, we'll split it with you. We'll Venmo you or whatever." Like so. Some people are just
Stays
born to be more
communicative.
conscientious. Yeah, exactly. But he knows. So it's just funny because he's just like, oh, they're not going to. That's why he does it as well. As he's like, well, I should be the one doing this because the two of them aren't going to do it. They're not going to get around to it.
But yeah, I'm the youngest and I went full rebellion.
Okay.
I was like, I don't want to be just because every school I went to, they're like, oh, you're this and this and this person's little sister. And I was known as the little sister, not
Ooh.
as Davina. And so that was hard for me. And instead, I was just like, I'm going to deviate from the norm. I'm going to like go completely this way in order to feel like I had my own autonomy and identity outside of just being my three elder siblings' younger sister.
Did you ever get in trouble in school?
Rarely.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Rarely.
Sorry,
I did once
I'm
in fourth
asking
grade.
personality questions now.
No, please.
Okay.
No, ask everything. I
Okay.
did in fourth grade. It was a very silly thing. And then after that, no, I I ditched school a lot, but my grades were always good. And school kind of came a bit more naturally to me. And so there was that like my attendance was really good, but I ditched a lot and I would like forge my mom's signature because I like studied her handwriting and I could like write my own little note and sign it and it passed. And so I ditched constantly. I graduated with, I think with like a 3.9 GPA. That all came there, but I don't like authority and I'm very intimidated by authority. And so I avoided having to interact with authority.
Okay. That's sounding. Were you a bit of a class clown, or were you more of like, nah, I'm just gonna like detach myself from this?
Like stayed within myself. For my earlier years, I was very outgoing. I was in choir and like the drill team and all of this. And then at some point in junior high somewhere, I just went inside, like fully stopped feeling confident. And then I went to a high school that all of my siblings had gone to, and I was constantly compared. And I just went internal. And then for my last 2 years of high school, I switched schools and no one knew me. And then there I thrived. And there I like made friends and all of that. But before that,
Okay.
no.
Well, I feel like the humpback whale read was pretty good. That sounds like very humpback whale-ish. Maybe a baboon, but that was why I asked the class clown question, because they're
Mm,
usually class clowns versus the daydreamer types. And you seem like
mm.
someone who just go internal, daydream, float away, and then partly like essentially it's all about the journey. So usually for shamans, so shamans are the personality pack, and humpback whales are one of the personality types that are inside that personality pack. But shamans in general have a search for self-knowledge, and it seems like that's kind of what you did when you were that age and now.
Interesting.
But
Yeah,
that's
stay
my
tuned.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have the Utopia project. So what all does that encompass?
So, it's really my website. So where people can learn about personality types. They can be encouraged to buy the book where you can really learn about the personality typing methodology. I also, as part of the Utopia project, I own a shared creative workspace in Los Angeles. And we don't do personality typing there. We do have events, like we're actually having an event in a couple weeks where a lot of life coaches have coming in and kind of doing presentations and stuff. But for the most part, it's somewhat separate to that. It's really just a space where people can kind of come and meet other people and also get like their creative work done. Or actually it could be any work. It doesn't have to be creative work, but it tends to be creative work in that space. And yeah,
Sounds
that's
like you
pretty much,
built a collective.
yeah, essentially a collective of people just working on stuff. And it's really like a gym, when you think about it. Like sometimes it really is hard to write and do the endeavors that we don't necessarily, I won't say don't think are going to be fruitful, but are told aren't going to be fruitful. And our common sense tells us that, or at least the common sense that we've been trained to believe. And so I think it's a lot more helpful to have people around us also going for those same goals. And it's more encouraging than anything else. No one wants to be the person in the gym just sitting there leering at people. So when you get there and there are people there working, what are you going to do? You're going to start writing or whatever it is that your creative endeavor involves.
Love that. That's yeah, I love that. And I also saw a speed dating based on personality type on
You
your
know,
site.
there I was trying to set that up. I actually have not set that up yet. That was actually one of the original um, thoughts of like making multi-tiered. And someone was telling me, there's this thing where people are like, oh, you should do an app. And there, I'm actually thinking about starting a podcast to
Yeah.
do a little bit more research on that actually for my next book. So there will be a follow-up book because people are asking. That's the first thing people ask is like, oh, I'm like this animal type. What people should I be hooking up with? Like, it's like the number one thing, no matter what context I'm in. I've done like talks at Hulu and stuff. And that's the first thing they ask afterwards. Like, that's great. We all want to work better as a team. We all want to be productive. But really, who should I be hooking up with? Tell me that. And so, that was part of the initial thought with the potential speed dating aspect that we haven't started yet. So that might be in the future, though.
Very cool. I love that. It's in one of my long-term, like 10-year plans to turn a study space, which is my main practice, into offering some level of matchmaking.
Oh, okay. Well,
Because of
that's.
the work that I do is anger management, and I give an anger assessment and a personality assessment to everyone. It's the Neo FFI 3
Mhm.
that I give them. And it's basically based on the big five. But I've wanted to do something like that because I oftentimes have couple or different clients that I think would make a really great couple, but that's super inappropriate of me, and I'm never going to cross that boundary and then be responsible for this. And so once I have a couple, I think like 400 or 500 clients in my database, but it's not nearly enough to like expand this fully. And I find it so interesting when certain people match with other people. And my husband and I are very different people. I don't think anyone really expects us to be together, and it just works. And so I'm actually curious to have him take the personality test too and see what he ended up as. Is there generally on the site, I didn't get to do too much of a deep dive. Is there that information on there of like which ones would be best suited for which personality types, or is that something you're keeping
I'm keeping a
private
little
for
bit
now?
of that, well, keeping that private for now, just because it's also I mean, there are articles that people have written where it does it very briefly. Like this, theoretically, these people would be good with these people. But I do want to always put the disclaimer. It's in theory, right? Like at the end of the day, like personality helps us